do not worship any other god. So the gods of their day, if you'll think about it, remember that they were leaving Egypt, where they worshiped over 80 different gods. This was the culture for the last 400 years that the Jewish people had been a part of. And whether or not they actually worshiped these other gods, the tendency is that they were certainly influenced by them. They knew about them, and they knew about the traditions of the Egyptians. And most likely, there were many who did, because up until the commandments, we had no other command to say, don't worship any other god. So they probably did worship these other gods, along with their god of their ancestors. They worship nature, cobras, frogs, bulls, flies, gnats, the Nile River. They had all sorts of gods. That whole little lineup there. Each one of them had different. The guy with the big round thing on his head, that's Ra. That would be the sun god. They worship the sun, the moon, the stars, the birds, the fish, the sea, the crocodiles, anything and everything. Because in their agrarian society, they saw all of this having an impact upon their ability to raise crops. If you remember, the Nile River floods that particular delta region each year, and after the floodwaters are down, they can really grow some great crops, and that's what and when it doesn't happen, guess what? Their whole economy's on the fritz. So that's why they began to worship these nature-type things. Later on, when Moses is on the mountain longer when they expected, they melted down their jewelry and made a golden calf. So there was still a tremendous influence of these foreign gods in their lives. See, most of these religions were what we call animist cults, or fertility cults. They could be closely related. Since they were agrarian, their dependence on the Nile River, the farming to flourish, some of the fertility cults were no more than just drunken orgies and human sacrifice rituals. They would sacrifice children in hopes that the blood of their life would bring life to the land. God found these forms of idol worship completely an abomination. So he lays down the first law. He says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Well, how does that affect our day? How about the gods of our day? What does that look like? Well, I've got a bunch of pictures up there. Today we live in a very pluralistic society where all forms of religion surround us. Kelly, I hope you don't mind me quoting you, but you were saying at Irvington you hear of a lot of really strange religions and things like that from the students there. In this neighborhood we have a variety of things that are worshipped. I know that there's a Buddhist temple about a half a mile from my house. I know that there are all sorts of things that surround us in this culture. You know, we used to call America a Christian nation, and probably there was a day when finding someone of a different religion, meaning other than Christianity, was pretty hard to find. Not anymore. By the way, I've said this before, but I'll remind you, we live in the Northwest, which is called the 67% none area. Meaning that when people list their religions, 67% of them list no religion at all. So as much as this area, this community thinks spirituality, they really don't. So there are other gods that have taken the place. The worldview of animism, for example, is quite relevant and prevalent today. I have a quote here. From Genesis to the present, the biblical worldview has clashed with the worldview of animism. Animism, or folk religion, is a religion that sees a spirit or spiritual force behind every event, and many objects of the physical world carry some spiritual significance. In most parts of the world, animism blends in with the formal religions. Among followers of the major religions lie many animistic beliefs and practices. Animistic beliefs actually dominate the world. Most Taiwanese believe in the Chinese folk religions. Most Hindus and Muslims in Central and Southeast Asia and most Buddhists in China and Japan combine their religion with various animistic beliefs and practices. In many parts of the world, Christianity has not displaced the local folk religion, but coexists beside it in an uneasy tension. So the sense is that there are this animistic, this folk religion, this belief that there's spiritual forces behind every event or in everything. Have you ever heard of the phrase namaste? Do you know what that means? It means I bow to the divine in you. And I had a lady in my office, this is down in Southern Cal, and I asked her about it. I said, so do you believe that there's a divine in everybody? And she goes, yes, don't you? I said, no, not until they ask Christ to be Lord of their life and live in their heart. Other than that, I don't think there's divine in each of us. I think we're created in the image of God. So I think we have infinite value, but I don't bow to the divine in somebody else. Meaning that there's a God or spirit in each one of you that is divine. So there's this cultural soup that we're in that is not Christian. And that's why we, Christians, need to help people discover Christ. Because they're lost. Now, let me tell you straight up that non-Christians do not like to be called lost. Don't walk up and say, you're lost. They go, no, I know exactly where I am. See, the terminology is what throws them. But what you can say to them is this: Christ has meant more to me than life itself. I am so grateful that I have a Savior in Jesus. I'm a follower of Jesus. And they'll listen to that. The problem with our gods of today that we also face, some form idol worship that will be tempted by today, that we're tempted by today, is like money and power and fame and celebrity worship. Howard Snyder is a professor of Wesley Studies at Tyndale Seminary in Toronto, Canada. He says of Americans are fundamentally polytheists. You know what polytheist means? Poly meaning many, theist meaning God. So many gods. So polytheists, worshiping at the shrines of many gods. Many who call themselves Christians are as polytheistic as Hindus. We, of course, have different names for our gods of prosperity, fertility, good luck, celebrity, and whatever. Money and success have often been thought of as America's gods. God is gold, the almighty dollar, and all that. But things have changed over the years. Money has been demoted to a somewhat lesser deity, though still devoutly worshipped. Next, there's the America's top gods. Starting with number 7, national security. We worship at the shrine of national security. Anything that is to make America safe, we are willing and ready to devote our time, energy, and money to. Just ever since 9/11, we've awakened to the reality that we are no longer safe in this world. So we spend billions of dollars as the United States to protect ourselves. Money, riches, and wealth, well, that's always been popular. That seems to be something that people strive and spend their entire lives pursuing, willing to sacrifice their families, their health, themselves, anything to acquire that. Guns have taken a new role of worship in our society. Kathy, back up one slide. Do you see that our gun family right there in that picture there? I had the oddest experience a couple of weeks ago. I'm driving down the road, and there in the back window, where lots of people like Pastor Julie have a silhouette of their family, they had this silhouette of the guns. And then in the middle, in the very center at the top, this is a van, and so the big window in the back, and in the center Now, I don't know about you, but that seems rather ironic to me. And to be a Christian in some areas means you better be packing. I have some pastor friends who pack, who carry a gun. And I was just sharing this morning, I'm neither pro nor against guns. I think guns make criminals like garbage makes flies. I mean, it's that kind of idea that the gun itself is neutral. It's what you do with it. Should people carry guns? Depends on the neighborhood you live in. But I tend to think that God, that's something that's a very personal, spiritual question that each person has to wrestle with. I do not own a gun. I don't have one in my home. Thought about it getting one, but for target practice, that kind of stuff. I mean, if you're going to own a gun and somebody breaks into your house, you better be willing to use it, correct? That means take the life, which goes to that thou shalt not murder thing. But we'll talk more about that. The automobile is a god in our culture. The status symbol. You drive an Escalade, or you drive if you drive a smart car. How can a smart car be smart? I just don't get that. But anyway, so it's. But you know what I'm saying? Status. We now have this thing called, your value in society is based upon what kind of nice car you drive. Fame and celebrity. There are parents willing to sacrifice everything so their child will be famous, to become a celebrity. Because they believe once their child does that, their child will take care of them monetarily. Collegiate sports. Now, I realize I'm treading on thin ice here. I'm preaching to Bedlam. But I do know people who worship at the shrine of the Ducks. And I do know people who worship at the shrine of sports. I'm not saying sports is evil or wrong. But when college guys are starting to get paid big bucks for their image on sporting goods, I'm sorry, we've left the collegiate level of learning and having good physical education to now we're making it an industry. The number one god of the United States is, drum roll please, professional sports. Do you know our professional sports guys are equivalent to rock stars? Just saw a news report the other day where they were talking about the 5 or 6 guys who hit the highlights because of spousal abuse. They are, their image is on everything. And I'm not a sports guy, so I'm a little, it distanced me. It makes me uncomfortable. But I got to tell you, we have some really strange gods in our culture. And I know these guys are created in the image of God, and they're wonderful people, but you know what? I think school teachers do a far better and more important thing than those guys do on the field or on the court. I think doctors do much more. I think there are people who do social work that do so much more for our people than the entertainment